Well, hello again and welcome into Interrupting Racism. I'm Brian Prawitz, your host, and happy to be back with you. It's been just a little while since we've had another one of our live Facebook and YouTube channel programs, but it is a pleasure to be back and for the first time really flying the flag of the American Leadership Forum, ALF of Oregon. ALF Oregon has, as officially as I guess they could, sort of embraced this effort. And pretty soon we will be not just sending out these signals to my personal Facebook page and also to YouTube, but also we will be on ALF official channels. And I'm really, really excited about that and honored because one of the big reasons for Interrupting Racism is the influence that the American Leadership Forum of Oregon has had over my life and me. I'm in class 34. That was 2017. The things I learned literally have changed my life. And so as we talk about ALF, we're referring to the American Leadership Forum of Oregon. And for the most part, the people we interview on this program are senior fellows from ALF, which would include today's guest, who is... There we go. Greg Addington. He is the owner of Addington Consulting, ALF Class 26. Here, I've even given you a title.
Nice.
Look at that fancy stuff right there. Thank you very much for the time today.
Hey, I'm really glad to be here, Brian.
I would say how's things in Klamath Falls, but I don't want to ask that question because it'll take us further downstream, as it were, to talk about probably some of the things that we're going to touch on. So the first thing I want to make sure we do is just introduce people to you a little bit. And as far as Greg's bio goes, he's basically been working in and around natural resources his entire career. 20 years, in the policy arena over 20 years ago as field representative for the Oregon Farm Bureau and transitioned into the Government Affairs Division as Associate Director, then moved to Klamath County in 2005. You've been very, very involved in the entire water discussion, you could say debate or controversy that's been happening and is back again. Maybe it never went away, but it's certainly in the headlines again in Klamath and in the Basin. But Greg has his own consulting company and served as chief of staff for a state legislator in the legislative session that just finished up in Salem. We're going to talk about that probably, but also Real Oregon, program director for Real Oregon, which is the resource education and agriculture leadership program. And so we have a lot of ground to cover, as usual, Greg, when we talk to people here on Interrupting Racism. How about just a background description for you? Tell us where you're from and how you landed in Klamath County, where you're at right now.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for having me here today. I'm glad to be part of this. So my story, I grew up in Southern Oregon, outside of Medford, Eagle Point specifically. Went up through school and high school there. My dad was a veterinarian in that area, since retired. But he grew up in the Klamath Basin and in Klamath Falls in particular. And so I always spent a lot of time here, had a lot of family connections to the area. Never really lived here until I moved here to work on the water issues, but very familiar and comfortable in this area. And so my career took me, as you mentioned, in the kind of the natural resource policy world. I worked as a lobbyist for the Farm Bureau, working on, agricultural issues, some forestry issues, water issues, and I did that for a time in Salem, but really realized I'm a Southern Oregon guy at heart. And so the opportunity came for me to come back here and serve as the executive director of the Klamath Water Users Association. So moved here in 2005 with my family and have been here ever since. I did that job as the exec for 10 years, just over 10 years, which is quite a while on a job like that, quite honestly. But we did a lot of good things. We worked on a big settlement agreement, which we might talk about. But it really, I did ALF at the same time, right in the middle of my tenure with the water users. So those two things really, influence some of the ways I look at the world now.
Sure. There's a lot to cover. Like I've said, the first thing is tell me about your ALF experience in class 26.
Yeah, so I didn't know much about ALF. I had actually, my predecessor in the role at the Water Users Association had done it a couple of years prior, and he had been encouraging. I think I was asked for a couple of years, and the standard. I don't really have time. I'm busy, and
what is it? And what exactly?
Yeah, and
why me? What? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I don't know. Things finally lined up, and enough people started calling and pestering, and so I said okay and signed up. And what I remember, and I would say this, with my entire class here. In fact, I have said it in front of my entire class. Is I remember the first session, sort of the orientation that we had, and I looked around the room, and there really wasn't anybody like me. Mostly, I would say, just from a geographical standpoint, certainly from a political standpoint, from a skin color standpoint. I mean, I just felt like, what am I doing here? I don't have anything in common. And I sort of had in my head, it was this urban and rural thing. There was going to be a mix of folks. Well, it felt to me that I was sort of the only Eastern Oregon rural white male in the room. And I thought, man, I don't know if I'm coming back. I remember leaving that first session going, this is not my thing. But I did come back. I did the team building exercises and the things, so basically I started off my experience. When I think back, I started off sort of resentful. Like I was sort of, I wouldn't say angry, but I was a little put off, that I felt like I was going to, I had like 25 or 6 other people and me. And so I was going to have to carry the weight of all of Eastern Oregon and rural values and all that stuff on my shoulders. Mm-hmm. As I reflect back on it, I actually, I enjoyed my experience very much. I met great people that I would never, ever have crossed paths with if not for ALF. And as far as my, whether it's political difference or geographic difference or skin color or whatever it was, it actually became a cool thing because everybody wanted to know what I thought. These issues would come up, and I never was at a loss for, folks saying, well, wait a minute, what's Greg think about this? And so it helped me. It kind of, I appreciated the people looking out for me and looking out for my opinion on things. And I learned a ton, and I hope some other people learned some things from me during the process too.
Man, you are almost verbatim when I describe what my experience was like. Southern Oregon, and we bring a certain perception to the room, I suppose, just like everybody else does, and it's pretty great when you're able to break down those perceptions and show more depth or more whatever to that entire crew. Now, while you were going through your year of ALF, you were also right smack in the middle of the Klamath reclamation discussion. It sounds like what was your role, first of all? And just a description of what that was like.
Yeah, so I mean, even casual observers will recognize that there are water issues in the Klamath Basin. There's always some tension, shortages, government regulation, tribal issues. I worked for the agricultural interests. I worked for the irrigation districts and the farmers that settled this area a little more than 100 years ago. And the Klamath, they say, you'll hear the term reclamation project. That just means the federal government, the Bureau of Reclamation, came in and did a lot of the infrastructure, built a lot of the infrastructure to deliver water to these lands. And so over years, there's 17 irrigation districts down in this area. Believe it or not, the project itself crosses into California, so it's in 2 states, it's in 3 counties, and there's just a lot of stakeholders, a lot of people that have interest in this watershed. So you have commercial fishermen are affected by what the salmon runs are on the Klamath River. You have the Klamath tribes in the headwaters up here, just kind of north of Klamath Falls. They have a lot of interest in what's happening in the lake. There are 2 species of endangered suckers in the lake that are not doing well. The lake feeds the Klamath River, which starts in Oregon and goes into California, at Klamath, California. And there are 2 tribes on the main stem, and then one on the Trinity River. So 3 tribes downstream that have a lot of interest in what's going on. The salmon are coho salmon are endangered. So this has been going on forever. People will maybe remember 2001. There was a big water shut off here. No farmers got very little water, almost none. There was a big rally. They called it the Bucket Brigade. There were 10,000 people in the streets of Klamath Falls. Again, 2001. Ironically, that ended. The protest, which went on all summer long, ended on 9/11, 2001, when the terrorist attack took place. The protesters here packed up and went home. Federal agents had other things to do, So it was a kind of ironically, a nice, a little patriotic moment, I thought, where it was like this protest and some hard feelings, but everybody recognized a greater need at that point. So anyway, that aside, these issues have been going on a long time. So I came in 2005, and to make a very long story short, there came to be a settlement process. All these different stakeholders, and believe it or not, there was over 40 parties involved, met for, it was most of the time I worked at the association, which was over 10 years. But I mean, I'd say 5 to 6 years meeting monthly, if not more, trying to hammer out a really comprehensive water sharing agreement is essentially what it was. And ultimately, we were successful in coming to agreement amongst ourselves. We were not successful in getting the political support we needed in Congress to make it happen. So I was doing ALF right in the middle of that. We had gone a long ways down the road. I can't remember. I want to say 2012 was my ALF class, maybe 2010. But we'd done quite a bit with the settlement. I developed a lot of relationships up and down the watershed. And so ALF was happening at the same time. And, it was interesting because on some of the things that ALF was talking about, I felt like I was ahead of the curve because of the sort of the bumps and bruises I'd taken in Klamath with dealing with a lot of really diverse interests. But then again, there's some things I took from ALF that I went, I hadn't thought of that, or here's a different way to approach this that I brought back to the table there that I felt helped me as well.
I've heard when my ALF class was in Klamath Falls, we were visited by a senior fellow who also was greatly involved in that entire process. And you probably could pop off with his name before I could. I don't remember his name, but he talked about the disappointment in doing all the work. I think he was the one who said, we were told basically by Congress to go get the witch's broom, right? Nobody expect us to come back with an agreement with 40 parties with the depth of this, all of the interests considered, and actually put something together. And when you did, it was almost a surprise. But he called it one of the greatest disappointments ever because there was so much collaboration, incredible amount of work, and then just this sort of a thud at the end where there could have been something better.
Yeah, it was. Well, that sounds very much like me. That I've said all those things over the years. The hardest thing I've ever done, one of the most worthwhile things I've ever done, and something I don't really want to do again. I would wrap it all into that. And it's easy to lay blame places, and that's what we like to do nowadays, is just point the finger at different. But there was a lot going on, and there was just if you want to think of it politically, we had people on the left that were throwing bombs at the process, and we had people on the right that were throwing bombs at the process. And I feel like we staked out a pretty good swath of middle ground, but it didn't work. And there's probably something to be learned there, or something to be said there.
Sure. So what's status now? If you could give us a 30-second snapshot of now, what are we looking at? Obviously, drought and water are in sort of in front of everybody because it's just a lot more obvious. If you're not a farmer, this is starting to come home to roost on regular folks that think they can just water their lawn all the time. Got restrictions in where we're at, just north of where I live, starting already on whether you can wash your car or do something as frivolous as wash your grass, water your lawn. So it's really becoming, I think you get a new group of people starting to look around and go, well, I always thought there'd be water for me to do these things, but obviously this is a very priceless commodity, and you're still back in the middle of it again. And we're hearing about some things that are happening in the Klamath Basin. What's a snapshot of how it's like over there right now?
Yeah, it's not good. It's where we all feared it would be if we didn't get a settlement done. It's, prior to the settlement, there was just a ton of litigation between parties, between tribes and the federal government, the irrigators and the federal government, the states, the fishermen. And, we had about a 10-year window of a ceasefire while we worked on this agreement. And, but, again, ultimately that didn't work. So there is just, we're back to litigation and what they call biological opinions. These are the federal agencies that come in when there's an endangered species and sort of dictate operations. And as it so happens this year, last year was tough. I mean, last year was a dry year, and then we just had no winter to speak of. And so then you come into this year and it's just magnified the situation. So there's clearly a natural drought. There's regulation at plays that limits the amount of water for agriculture. So they say we need to leave more water in the system for the species. In the meantime, we've been doing that on and off for 20 years. The species are still in peril. They haven't improved one iota in the river or the lake. So, that's a frustrating thing for everybody concerned. You have this whole state question of water rights. Who gets what, the tribes, the farmers, all involved in that. So it's a very, there's a lot of tension down here right now. There's a lot of animosity here right now, and a lot of frustration right now. You asked for 30 seconds. That was more than that. And I could keep going. It's a complicated thing. And it's, we have a situation right now where the canals here have never been dry. Even in 2001, there was water in the system. It wasn't really being used, but big system of canals. Well, there has always been water in those canals for over 100 years. And so the community was developed. So you built a house, you drilled a well or dug a well, 30 feet, 40 feet, 50 feet. Well, those wells are all recharged by the canal system. So this year there's zero water, nothing in the canal. So there's over, the last number I heard was 130 domestic wells have gone dry. I mean, so it's not just farmers don't have water, people don't have water.
Yeah, I figured when I asked you for a 30-second snapshot, it was unfair and probably not possible. And I was right in both cases there, but also just really important. I'm curious about your experience in the legislature, and which you can talk about, what your role was there, but just give us a description there. It'll kind of lead me into my next line of conversation.
Well, I love policy work and I love the natural resource issues. I love working with people and trying to figure out solutions. I'll say one thing, I've been around the legislature a lot in my career, or Congress, different legislative bodies. And so I get how it works. I know how it works. But yeah, I have a longtime family friend that's a legislator, Eastern Oregon legislator, asked me to come help as her chief of staff for the session. And I said yes. Sometimes I wonder why I said yes, but and I love her and I will always help her out, but I'm glad to not be doing it. It's it's just a challenging time. I don't think anybody watching this, and I don't think I have to tell you that things are different now. I feel there's just so much animosity and It's so much about elections and we forget the elections are one piece of the puzzle. Then there's policy making and legislating that's supposed to happen, but it just seems like it's so focused on the numbers, the races, and I say this, I guess I have to be, I don't have to be careful. I don't, it's on both sides. I mean, it's all over. I'm not pointing fingers one way or the other. It's just not a healthy process right now to solve problems, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. And as you described the Klamath Basin situation, as you described your experience in ALF as well, there's a lot of effort on urban versus rural, trying to bridge that gap, trying to grow understanding. I've heard it said by my more conservative friends that, it feels like you do a ton of work to try and bridge the gap, and then a key moment will come up, and it's just we're in a blue state, and the big cities rule, and there's whoever has the majority is, and it's almost always been the Democrats. Comes down to it, man, you do all that work, and then bam, your hand gets slapped, if you will. That's probably an understatement. And how frustrating that can be, because we do hear a lot of talk about how important it is that rural interests be considered, and there's some willingness apparently on some level to at least have the conversation, but how does it actually manifest itself in that moment? I guess you could bring it back to that whole discussion about taking the Klamath agreement to Congress and then having it just be not acknowledged.
Well, I'll say this, Brian. I think that the folks, and I'm looking at myself here in rural Oregon, we love to say that Portland's running the show. They're running over us. There's an urban-rural divide, and there is, and I get it, and it's everything you just said. And we demand that they understand our issues. But I also have started telling us, our folks, are we doing our best to understand urban Oregon's issues? Do we really? Are we understanding truly what's going on with the homeless situation in the state, and particularly in these urban areas? Are we understanding what's going on with violence in these areas and families? And, so I always caution folks now. It's like, yeah, we can jump up and down, and we've got a reason to. I mean, I fall in the camp that think that, we give a lot of lip service to the urban-rural divide, but when push comes to shove, urban Oregon wins on the policy matters, and it's true. But we have to educate. The burden's on us. We have to do a better job of educating urban legislators, and beyond that, the population in those areas. But we have to also really kind of bear down and try to understand some of the issues that they're facing too. Because what I saw at the legislature, and I'll say this, I mean, it's not totally poisonous the whole time. I mean, people are cordial. There's people do things for one another. There is good nature amongst parties and legislators. But at the end of the day, there's big policy issues where there's differences, and those divides become really, really clear, and it's, again, there's, one party that's running that show. So I don't know. It was a really unique experience for me. It makes me think about things a little bit differently, but I'm happy to be back to my old world.
So there's kind of the thought of, you could fall into one camp that would say things are never going to change. It's divisive. It's always going to be divisive. But there's another camp that would say some sort of cooperation, some sort of understanding has to start somewhere. And where is that conversation going to start? And I think this might be the very root of ALF, actually. Where's the conversation going to start? And I don't really have a great answer for that, other than in our own communities and with people that we know, and maybe trying to say things that people don't expect to come out of the mouth of the white business leader in a community. But what's your take on sort of a philosophy or an attitude of whether it's you or anybody else, that somewhere the conversation has to start, to begin building some bridges in Salem, in the legislature, as Pollyanna as that may sound to some people?
Well, it reminds me, I kind of quit mid-thought on the last question, but there has to be some, I don't know. I think there has to be some empathy, right? I mean, an easy thing to say, but really trying to understand where somebody else is coming from. Because what you see at the legislature is certain legislators, and I see it on both sides, just vote no, unless it's like something really just red meat, no problem, easy for their district. They don't have anything to worry about. So, well, that doesn't do anything. You're there to be part of a process, hopefully engage in some kind of dialogue, and compromise. I mean, I don't know when or why compromise became such a dirty word in our society, but it's looked at as a sign of weakness. It's looked at as capitulation, and that's not what it is, and that's not what it should be. It's not what it ever was intended to be. This country wouldn't be here if we didn't have compromise. And so I just think people have to dig a little deeper. And I personally just am about trying to understand the person across from me and a little bit about what makes them tick and what they're passionate about. And that gives me some sense of who they are. You develop a relationship. And then if you need something, like I could use some help from a majority member on this particular issue, you've built a bridge there. You've got somebody to talk to. It won't always work, but man, it could work.
Yeah, but there's only one way to find out, I think, right? And that's to do it. I want to talk about Addington Consulting, but I want to talk about the REAL program. You just touched on probably some messages that you share with people. So describe REAL to us.
Yeah, so it stands for Resource Education and Agricultural Leadership. And the point there is to kind of, what it was the industry, agricultural, farming, fishing, forestry, leaders in that industry sort of coming together and saying, what's our professional development? If you're a farmer, if you work for a company or something, there's all kinds of professional development. You go to a conference on this or that, public speaking. There's all sorts of opportunities for continuing education. But if you're a farmer or a forester, what are your opportunities to better yourself, to develop your skills as a leader? And so that's where it started. And to back up even more, it started probably in 2002. I was in a class, an original class. They had modeled it after a program in Washington. And frankly, the timing was just, I had a great time. I met great people that are leaders in the industry today were part of my cohort there. But it wasn't sustainable in the way they did it. It was a very aggressive program, 2 years, a big national trip, international trip was a component. And I think it was just sort of the, running before you learned how to walk. And so it took a while, but basically the industry came back and said, we want to create a program. And some of those folks that are leading the industry were people I was in a program with, and they knew I was doing consulting work and said, hey, are you interested in helping us build this program? So that was 5 years ago. We're hoping to start Class 5 here this fall. And again, we target producers, forestry, farmers, ranchers, fishermen, but we also open it up. It's usually 25 to 30 people. We open it up to, related businesses. It might be insurance, it might be fertilizer, chemical sales, it might be financiers, a variety of different things. So it's been great. We've run 4 full classes through the program. We've started to develop an alumni base, and we go for 5 months. So we do it in the wintertime when producers are generally not as busy. So we start in November and we do like 1 week a month for 5 months through March. And so it's been great. We visit different locations. We spend one session in Klamath Falls. We talk about water issues. We do some personal, professional development, strength finders, things like that. We spend the next session in your neck of the woods in Roseburg and focus on forestry issues. We do some media work, public speaking, things like that. We moved from there to the coast to Newport and learn about commercial fishing and the issues that they face. There's not been a lot of cross industry connection with ag and fishing, even though many of the issues are really, really similar. So that's a bridge we're trying to build there. We spend a session in Eastern Oregon, either Ontario or Boardman, looking at agriculture in those areas. And then we finish up, depending on the year, with Salem session focusing on the legislature and policy making.
Well, that sounds amazing. Do you include things like the whole, learning to listen to the other person? I think one of the best rules that popped up in my ALF experience was no fixing. So you wouldn't necessarily try to convert somebody to your way of thinking necessarily. It was a lot about listening. Is that kind of part of the messaging? Do you follow some of those tenets that you learn in ALF?
Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, ironically, my ALF leader was Robin Teeter back in the day, and I've stayed connected with Robin over the years. And the last 2 years, I've asked Robin to come in, and we spend several hours now on a whole, dialogue versus debate, and the differences in being an active listener and those kind of things. So I've definitely incorporated some of that. 1 year, we've tried, we get a little more comfortable. We develop our curriculum a little more. I've definitely used ALF as a model, thinking about how doing check-ins. That'll sound familiar to people. That's something that we've started doing, is just kind of checking in with folks on what's going on in their lives. And, a lot of pressures on people these days. So sometimes it's good for them to get that out with folks. Over the years, the last few years, we've tried to incorporate much more about, equity, diversity, inclusion, racial justice, environmental justice. We've talked about a lot of those things. We probably don't do a good enough job on those, but we're getting better, and I'm getting more connected with people that can help us have good discussions about those in a group setting. I have tapped into an ALF classmate of mine from Portland who came and did an amazing session for us on just some of the racial issues, the way people think about things. So definitely some crossover. I've definitely tried to incorporate that. And I think we talk about the urban-rural divide a lot. And so I guess in some ways I've turned the tables when I talk to you about my ALF experience, feeling like I was like the only sort of rural voice. I've decided to bring in like an urban voice every once in a while, and sort of turn the tables that way. But in seriousness, just to try to, we target producers. That's who we fundraise for. This program's all funded by industry itself. There's no public dollars involved or anything like that. So it's really targeted towards the producers. But if we can find a connection or an interest from somebody in a more urban area for a program like this, we're definitely talking to them.
And then the tribal element to this, you mentioned all the different places, and clearly it doesn't matter where you go. The perspective from the tribes has to be critical in all of those conversations as well. And I would think that your ALF experience probably makes that very clear to you. Maybe, gives you some awareness and maybe some ability to relate to people in the tribes and our native neighbors. Mm-hmm. How much are they involved in all these things that you've been talking about with the REAL program?
Yeah, so not enough. We have a gap there, and that is definitely, when you talk about natural resources in Oregon, you can't talk about that without talking about the tribal perspective. And so we do try to incorporate that perspective, but we've had a hard time, I think, sort of landing that airplane and connecting with tribes in a meaningful way to get them like actually participating in the program. I mean, it is a priority and a goal of ours to do that. It's interesting because again, going back to my years working on the water settlement, I worked every single day with members of the Klamath tribes and then the downstream tribes, the Karuk tribe, the Yurok tribe, and developed, truly meaningful friendships there. It was an important time in my life, and I have good friends today that are members of those tribes. But things change, just like in the water world. We get a new board of directors, the tribe gets a new tribal council. Different people have different ideas about how to be successful or achieve their goals. And so there's the way things are in Klamath right now with the water is just a lot of tension. So we've got ground to plow there. I mean, we really do. We need to work on that. But like I say, I think the good news is that the people who I answer to, I have a board of directors that are made up of the natural resource sector, leaders in the state. They're very open to that. They're very open to those conversations. They want to have tribal voices be part of our program.
I really enjoyed the time that we spent at the Grand Ronde when we were there in my class, and learned a ton. It sparked interest in me learning more about the tribal history and where we are relative to all the tribal history that exists. And then the other thing that really hit me, which is probably at the heart of some of what we've talked about when you talk about water, is how recently the Celilo Falls was backed up with the dams on the Columbia River. 1957. I mean, so many of these things are so recent, and it plays so large and everything going on. And just having an appreciation and awareness of those things, I think, is meaningful to members of tribes, although that's probably just scratching the surface, So
I totally agree with you. I think that there's a lot of reasons, and I'm, colored by where I live and who I interact with on a daily basis here. But again, reflecting back to my time when we were working really closely with the tribe, is that you're exactly right. That matters. I mean, I had a hard time, and ALF taught me this. I had a hard time with white privilege, with that whole conversation, with and by the way, as an aside, I just think sometimes these labels are brutal, right? They just set people off. It's like, I know what you're saying now, but when I first heard that, and a lot of my neighbors now hear that, they just go off the deep end, and we could talk about that.
There's big reaction to that.
Yeah. And so, I was there. I had that kind of reaction. I'm like, hey, I work for what I got, And so I kind of lost my train of thought there, but basically, I've come to grips with that way more now. I understand it much more. Still don't like the label, but I think that we still are wrestling with that in rural Oregon. Like, how do we, and just understanding and recognizing the past, and as you said, the recent past, and in Klamath is a great example. I mean, what we did with tribal folks was not right. We as a country, as a society, it was not right. We made huge mistakes, and we should do better. And I think saying that matters. And that doesn't mean that it's all my fault and I have to make it right. It means I understand.
Right. Yeah. I'm involved in a little bit of conversation around here in our neighborhood that's a little uncomfortable right now. And when I start saying things like, you know what, I might be part of the problem, or I have a lot to learn, or I can do better. I've had friends in my network who look like me say, man, you need to be like, go easy on yourself. Gee whiz, you're too hard on yourself. And I just think my life changed when I started realizing some of that stuff. Like, I need to learn some things, and I can do better. And I had a ton to learn, and I want to learn more. So that process is so valuable. I think there's so much. I think it makes you and I better people, because if we can relate to more people and listen, then I think we're ahead of the curve,
Well, and I'll tell you, and this goes back to my ALF experience. I'd mentioned to you, I made a very good friend, African American woman from Portland. I have zero in common with, other than
You
we live in
never would have met. You
no.
never would have met. Yep.
And so she not only came to my real Oregon and put on a presentation about equity, inclusion, diversity, equity, inclusion, but we remain in touch, and we've had our ups and downs. Politically, she drives me wild, and Facebook is no help for much of this stuff. And I'm sure she would say the same about me. But at the end of the day, I text her, I tell her happy birthday. I would do anything for her. We get together if we can. It's been a long time, but yeah, I mean, it's not rocket science. Everybody's saying it now, but a lot of lip service. But yeah, you can disagree on things, but still do good things together, and be patient, and have a little grace with people.
Well said. That was part of the motivation for this, trying to get some civil conversations out there into the social media world, because there's just so little of it. And it's very difficult. It's not impossible. It's very difficult to bring up any of these really hot button issues and have any kind of benefit come from it on Facebook. I have seen it happen a little bit, but it's very difficult. Instead, being able to talk to somebody, ask them about what it's like to be in their life, or how their life has developed, or what their background has been, what's their experience been, even in your own town where you're at, is really priceless. Now, there's a line, because you don't want to sit there and ask somebody to explain their humanity to you. And there's certain things that have happened in history that they shouldn't have to explain to guys that look like us, talking about racial things. But I just encourage anybody watching this, and Greg, you're a good example of this, of what it means to get to know somebody that has walked a completely different life than you, has had totally different experiences. Maybe their ethnicity is totally different, but the value in that conversation is really unmeasurable. And then it comes out in places like this, where all of a sudden you might find yourself in a situation where you have the ability to bring more people to the table, and being able to just have those conversations makes you extremely valuable and important in building bridges, understanding in the community. So much value. And it's an honor to be in that role. You've been that guy, and
Wow.
It's just important. So,
well, I've been fortunate, Brian, and I've done a lot of different things, and I enjoy meeting new people and understanding what makes them tick. I'll tell you one thing, and I know you're short on time here, but the one thing that I would leave folks with is, I think, and this goes to the legislative conversation too about how things work. I think we worry too much about what the other guy's doing, what the other guy's getting, what they're thinking, what their issues are. When we were doing the settlement, it was a really hard thing for me and the folks I work for to realize, there's all these things about the dams in the river, and the fishing interests, and the amount of money that would go for restoration. These are interests of, just say, a tribe or the tribes. And so we were in a place where we were worrying about, trying to argue. We were arguing, fish biology with tribal fish biologists, right? That's a losing proposition for somebody like me. The flip side is, I didn't want tribal fish biologists telling us how much water we need for a potato plant in the Klamath Basin. And so we sort of kind of said, here's what we need. And they said, here's what we need. And once we could stop worrying about what their needs were, just, if you get the three things that you need, who cares? Who cares? And once we got over that point about being so darn worried about what the other person should or shouldn't get, whether it was right or wrong, identify what you need out of this. And if you get to that point, let's shake hands and move on.
Interesting. It sounds a little bit like having an opinion about some of these big issues, and then meeting somebody who actually has lived some of those issues.
Yeah.
Like, Greg, I think I know what you need out of this conversation. So I'm just going to tell you what you're going to need. Is that, or am I on kind of, are we tracking the same way?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then you get the reality of what their experience is and what they need. And it kind of, I've said this a few times lately, my opinion of your reality doesn't really matter once I know your reality, you know?
Yeah.
But, well, is there anything else you wanted to touch on? I think we hit on most of the major topics that we agreed we'd chat about today.
Here, my parting line will be spend time with a cup of coffee or a beer or having food with somebody you don't agree with. That'll go a long ways to getting stuff done. Break bread.
I'm gonna put that on a t-shirt. Hey, Greg, thanks for the time.
Okay, Brian, it was great.
I really appreciate it a lot. And hopefully we'll be able to connect again soon and chat about some of these things a little bit more. And anytime when you bring the real program over to Roseburg, let me know. I'd love I would
love to do that.
I'll sit in the corner and I'll listen deeply.
We'll make a point.
Yeah, that'd be fantastic.
All right.
Well, I want to take people through some announcements from ALF. So you can hang on, Greg, or I'm just gonna kind of take you out of the little system right here real quick. But you can stick around if you want to. We can chat in a second. But let's see if I can do this without blowing up my little system here. I'm going to share the screen. So we have a little bit more of an official relationship, I guess you could say, with ALF these days. Gee whiz, am I going to be able to even do this? I don't know if I'm going to be able to. I'm going to get a weird feedback for just a split second, folks. Hang on. Let's see if that works. Dang it. All right. Yeah, share. Yeah, I want to call up. I'm gonna say share. It's gonna blow this thing up, I think. Window. Oh wow, what a hack. This is yeah, that's what I was afraid of. Did that work? No, forget it. This is like watching a guy try to open a PDF. So no, I wanted to make sure that I promoted some things on ALF. So first of all, ALF's Oregon virtual check-in. The next one's coming up August 3rd. Check out alf.org. So this is to all the senior fellows that are out there. There's conversations on houselessness coming up on August 4th. And ALF Oregon LGBTQ plus social hour, August the 6th. There's also a BIPOC fellows and senior fellows virtual check-in and white leaders for racial justice, August 24th. Check it all out at alf.org. And you can also watch the 2021 reunion gala, which was a whole lot of fun to watch and really meant a lot to everybody. So there's a few things about what's going on at ALF, American Leadership Forum of Oregon. This is the new logo, by the way. We're in the know and have the new cool bling going. Thanks to Greg Addington and to everybody who's been on the program. Very soon, you'll be able to watch this live on the ALF channels, both Facebook and YouTube. Please make your comments available to us. I noticed that we did get a shout out. Well, I'll put a shout out there to Lisa Watson, our executive director at ALF, the ALF staff watching live together. And we are grateful also for your support, Lisa, and everybody up there at ALF as well. So please spend a little time there at alforegon.org and learn more about that. And we will talk to you again another time. Thanks again for watching Interrupting Racism. Hope you have a good afternoon.